people compare it to the difference between golf teams competing and football teams competing. With football teams, there's a high level of interdependence. There's a shared goal, and the only way to achieve that goal is to work together. So yeah, it matters because I think that without that intentionality, the results are just not going to be there. We expect people to know this, but we're not really training leaders to have those tools in their toolkit to clarify the how of work often.
Welcome to Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today, we're joined by Dutch organizational change expert Jurriaan Kamer. He's co-author of two powerful books, Formula X and Unblock, and his work focuses on how to create thriving, fast-moving organizations by doing one thing really well, building better teams. We often focus too much on who is on the team, but Jurriaan's message flips that thinking. It's not about who you have, it's about how you build. So if you have ever been frustrated by underperforming teams or wonder how to unlock true speed and collaboration, you're going to want to stay around. Jurriaan, thank you for joining me today on the Science of Leadership.
Thank you for having me, Tom. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, let's start right at the heart of this. Today, we're talking about this idea that it's not who you have on your team, it's how you build it. Can you lay out the foundation of that concept and why you've come to believe that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to put it out there, I think who is on the team still matters, but it's not the complete picture. So there's something that we also need to do to build great teams. And just after coaching hundreds of leadership teams all across the globe, I found that it's really about spending the time to make agreements with each other about how we're going to work and how we're going to collaborate really makes a difference. So think about, how do we define success? What kind of expectations do we have from each other? Who holds what roles? Who has what accountability? How do we make decisions? How do we reflect and improve? How do we give and receive feedback? If those things are missing or unclear, you can put any type of group together and you still won't get high performance, irrespective of the talents of the individuals in the team.
That explanation makes a lot of sense. Certainly, this idea of expectation, establishing expectation at the outset. What does success look like for this group? What are we trying to do? Who's responsible for what? Those sorts of things that you delineated are so important. And I think you're right that often organizations don't really articulate those in a manner that is clear and rememberable to the people that are in the organization, and that leads to failure.
I agree, and I honestly say that great leaders actually do clarify these things, mostly implicitly. They're not so aware that they're doing it, but many leaders don't. They just assume that people know, and they when somebody is new in the team, they just jump in. But I always tell them, like, they're flying blind. They're walking around in the dark, trying to figure out how things are going to be working here. They're trying to tiptoeing into, is it okay if I do this? Is it not okay if I do this? And that's just a lot of waste of time and energy. It's just super helpful to clarify those agreements, to have a conversation about it regularly, so that any member in the team knows what to expect from each other and can hold each other accountable for it.
So as I was thinking about this conversation, and I think you kind of hit on it, that I was thinking about Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. And in that book, he says, basically the fundamental thing is getting the right people on the bus before you figure out where you're going. And I must admit that I disagree with that, because most organizations that I know exist principally for a given reason. GM exists to make vehicles. The New York Yankees exist to win the World Championship, the World Series. And so anyway, I was wondering how this thing that we're talking about today aligns with that notion from Good to Great.
Yeah. Oh, first I'm curious, Tom, are you related to Jim in any way?
I'm not, no.
Okay.
I mean, other than the surname, no.
Okay. Yeah. It's a quite common name, of course, but No, I think Jim has some really good things in his book, but getting the right people on the bus is again, like I said, it's not the whole picture. First of all, let's talk about what the bus is.
Yeah.
What kind of thing is this? Where is the bus going? What seats do we have on the bus? How many seats do we have on the bus? What is expected from the person sitting all the way in the front of the driver's seat? And that's what I'm talking about. So getting the right people on the bus, sure, it's important, but clarifying how we work is just as important, I think.
Yeah. Well, can you share a story from your work that really showcases what we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of years ago when I worked with a leadership team of a bank, and I was hired by the CEO, and when she became CEO, she decided to hire some of the brightest talents in the business into that leadership team, including promoting the stars from within, the talents. All of them were super high performers and experts in their field. And despite that everyone was working super hard and was tremendously busy, somehow it didn't lead to a result that she was hoping for. So she asked us to come in and coach and train the team, and I joined them for a quarterly offsite. On the first day, I observed what was happening. So the setup of the first day was that each department head would present the results of the last quarter to the others and show off what they had done. What I immediately noticed that if one leader was speaking, the others were not really paying attention much, right? They're disengaged, sometimes on their phones or laptops. And then the CEO, she went and challenged them or asked them questions. And when she challenged the individuals, they were quick to blame other departments for their failures.
Mm.
They were like, "Yeah, I know. We were supposed to sell more, but you know what? The product that we had that was lined up by the product team didn't come through quickly enough, or the marketing department didn't do their job, so we couldn't really create the brand awareness and sell easily." So this blame game happened a lot, and that's obviously frustrating and not so effective. And it felt like the United Nations, a place where people come together to lobby for their constituents, and they
Mhm.
were really like a working group, not an actual team. So the second day, we flipped the script and we forced them to pause and zoom out and reflect on how they work as a team, how and let them see and acknowledge that a collective, not an individual effort, was needed trying to bring the company into the next level. So yeah, we spent time making agreements about our shared definition of success, clarifying the different roles and responsibilities that we had in our team to achieve that objective together. We spoke a lot about acceptable behavior, including how we listen to each other, how do we approach things from curiosity rather than judging and blaming, and also spoke about how should we hold each other accountable and give each other feedback if we see others not performing. We spent time writing these agreements on a team charter or like a team manifesto, getting them to sign it even. And yeah, over the months that followed, they used that as guidance, and they were able to overcome some of the biggest obstacles holding back the company, including basically how the leadership team operated, which was one of the bigger obstacles.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that. As you were speaking, you made a distinction that some people may have not necessarily caught, but and is the subject of different books. But this idea of the difference between a team and a working group.
Yeah.
Could you sort of delineate that?
Yeah, sometimes people compare it to the difference between golf teams competing and football teams competing. So in a golf, if you have a match with a golf team, all the players they play individually, and at the end of the day, they add up the scores, and then that's the team result. With football teams, there's a high level of interdependence. It's
Mhm.
there's a shared goal, and the only way to achieve that goal is to work together and to tap into each other's skills and roles on the field, and play the ball to each other. That's to me the big difference between a group of people is working next to each other rather than a group that's interdependent and reliant on each other to achieve success.
Thanks for spelling that out. Jurriaan, why do you believe it's so important for leaders to get this idea? It's not who, it's how. Right. Why does that matter for organizations?
Yeah, I mean, humans can achieve great, amazing things with large groups of people, but it won't happen naturally. It's not if you put 1,000 people in a room and you say let's build a rocket and go to the moon. That doesn't really work automatically. You really need to put in the effort to figure out how do we organize ourselves, how do we put together groups of people, who's going to do what. So yeah, it matters because I think that without that intentionality, the results are just not going to be there. It's like we expect that people to know this, but we're not really training leaders to have those tools in their toolkit to clarify the how of work often.
Yeah. Hey, I'm breaking into the podcast conversation here to share with you an exciting announcement. If you've been following the Science of Leadership podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about the book I've been working on. Well, I'm delighted to share that after over 3 years of work, my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is finally available. I'm so proud of this book and what it represents. I'm certain that you're going to find it immensely interesting and helpful as a guide on your journey to becoming a better leader. Seriously, you don't want to miss this book. I'm including a link to the book in the description. I hope you'll order your copy today. And please share it with others who might be interested. Also, please be sure to share your thoughts about the book with me. Now, let's get back to this interesting conversation on the science of leadership. Looking back across your experiences with companies all over the globe, do you have an example of a company that didn't really start succeeding until they started focusing more on the how instead of just the who?
Yeah, so there's a couple of examples out there of clients we cannot necessarily name, but
Sure.
we've seen transformations in companies where HR, for example, led the way in building the capabilities in the leadership development to be explicit about these kinds of agreements, or to give organizational practices to leaders that lack them. So it's really, for me, it's about upskilling, but it's also about facilitation. So we've seen some great companies have results when they acknowledge that facilitation as a technique to get people to have the right conversations in an effective manner is often missing and undervalued. And if they kind of invest in it and build a group of internal facilitators and coaches, they were able to kind of get to the next level for sure.
Yeah. This is the time in the podcast where I usually will bring in the scientific concepts and things of that nature. So if we could talk about the science of this idea for a minute,
Yeah.
do you have any scientific studies that you're aware of that you could draw on that really tie into what we're talking about today? As, what are the data that show us that this really matters so much?
Yeah. Yeah, there's one study, and I don't know if it will meet your bar of scientific study, honestly, which is obviously a problem with a lot of management studies. There's a lot of pseudoscience happening, unfortunately. But the study that I quote often is Google, where they studied over 200 teams across the organization, from engineering to sales and product management, from San Francisco to Singapore, and they really wanted to figure out how do we build the perfect team. And what they found is that the number of top performers on the team, or the team's average intelligence, wasn't really a good indicator of a team's effectiveness, right? So they were one of the first who acknowledged, to say, who on the team matters much less than how the team members interact, how they structure their work, and how they contribute. And so some of the lessons on psychological safety, equality in conversational turn taking, having social sensitivity, those more softer stuff were really proven by the data-driven research that Google did on their teams.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That is a well-known study, and I think it was performed rigorously and would meet the
Okay,
bar of
good.
of decent scientific investigation. Just recently, we had Dr. Dave Logan, who is a professor of business and management at the University of Southern California, and has written multiple books. And he was talking about culture, and
Hmm.
and what he was discussing goes hand in hand with this same idea. Ultimately, and the example that here in the U.S. we use a lot is the U.S. basketball team, the Olympic basketball team,
Hmm.
right? I forget when it was. It was circa 2000 something, early 2000s. Our basketball team thought they were great because they had a lot of great individual players.
Hmm. Hmm.
Far and away the best collection of players in the world at that time. And they lost
Hmm.
because they met a team as opposed to a bunch of highly skilled individuals.
Right.
And so and there are multiple studies that do in fact show that this, what you're describing, it's the power of the individuals who come together and work together as opposed to the power of the individuals working separately that
Right.
really makes the biggest difference.
And that requires a lot of mutual understanding and empathy among each other. It's about, I mean, the big difference will be, like, if you see another player fail, do you kind of feel good about yourself that it wasn't you, or do you go to them and try to pick them up and make them better? It's about that. It's about understanding people at a deeper level, people's intentions for doing the work, or fears, or maybe patterns that they are aware of, that pitfalls. And
Mhm.
if you're really knowing the people on your team from that level, you know how to get the most out of each other. And that's
Yeah.
also not relying only on the leader, right? It's leadership among the people that are in the group, and it's not just relying on one person leading the whole team, which is another myth I think we should break.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting. There was this study, and I can speak from my own field of cardiology. There was this study that was done years ago where they were looking at the importance of the high performing cardiac surgeon.
Mm,
Okay, and so the cardiac surgeon in my field of congenital heart disease is the center. Okay, is
yeah.
within our solar system would be the sun, right? Like
Right.
everything
Right.
kind of revolves around the cardiac surgeon, and everybody attributes all the success to the surgeon and so on.
The
But
hero.
yeah, the study that in this study they looked at surgeons who uh, worked at multiple hospitals.
Right.
And what they found was that results were different at different places. So it wasn't the surgeon only,
Right.
right? It was the team, and it was very clear that there were certain teams that worked much better together, and there
Yeah.
were those that didn't, and the outcomes were distinctly different despite having this all-star
Right.
at all
Yeah.
these places.
I mean, people want to pick the hero in the story, and then worship them. But it's true. It's there's a lot more people involved usually to get the result.
Yeah, it's almost some kind of human nature to wanna attribute to the one person as opposed
Right.
to the group, which is interesting since we're such social animals.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I think it's about ego. It's about just simplifying reality as well. It's like it's so easy to just attribute everything to one person rather than trying to hold the complexity of 1,000 people that had to work together to do this. So it's about how do we tell stories as well. I think that's also a filter for this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's something to be said about a cognitive load.
Yeah.
You can't keep in order all the variables and all the people and what degree they contribute to this outcome. And just as you say, we as humans are built for story, not for data,
Right.
which is why I try to bring story into this podcast so much.
Yeah.
We remember stories, but we don't remember stories with 1,000 different characters.
Yeah.
We
Exactly.
remember, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and Leia and Han Solo and Yoda, you
Yeah.
know,
That's
a
about it.
handful, right? You know,
Yeah.
and so I suppose that that does have something to do with some of this on some level. It'd be interesting actually to study that.
Hmm.
Maybe that'll be something I can do down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jurriaan, for our listeners out there who are wondering how to realize this concept in their own
Yeah.
teams,
Yeah.
what are some key practical tips you can offer them?
I would start as soon as possible with holding time and space to reflect with your team on how you operate together. We often don't do that. We often skip that because it doesn't feel productive. But if you're not improving, you're slowly degrading. I always say so. It's really about spending just put it on a schedule, 2 hours every 2 months or 1 hour every month, a non-negotiable 1 hour time to reflect on how things are going, acknowledge all the things that are going well, but also looking at what is not working and what are the agreements that maybe are missing. What is something about how we work that's really hindering us, and then figuring out a way forward together. It's really worth it. It's just it is definitely not productive in the moment, but it's an investment in the future success of the team.
Here's another question. If someone out there is under pressure for their team to perform, instead of thinking, I need better people, what would you recommend they think?
They should think about their role, because you can be so busy being in the middle of a traffic intersection, directing the traffic like a traffic cop,
Yeah.
But you'll never get out of that if you don't take a bird's eye view of the situation and take on the role as the road designer. Where you're like, hey, how does this system of roads come together? What is causing us to be overloaded? what is missing in the system so that this is constantly happening. And I think that's really a shift for leaders to try to see themselves more like a road designer rather than a traffic cop. Because you can try to work harder, but if you don't work smarter, you'll be stuck in the hamster treadmill.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a shift from kind of management to leadership,
Right.
right? Are we doing the right thing? What's the big picture here? Are we going
Yeah.
the right direction? That sort of thing versus those moment to moment, nuts and bolts kind of things. So, all right. Thanks for sharing that. I can't help but notice in your background the cover of your book, Unblock. I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about what secrets are in there. Not the full
Yeah.
thing, of course. You want other folks to buy the book, but if you could share some of that.
Yeah. Unblock's subtitle is Clear the Way for Results and Develop a Thriving Organization. And it's focused on, it's a practical management book. So, first of all, it's really a practical book for leaders that want to get better results while also building a better organization. And it focuses on the 6 most common obstacles for success. So it goes into setting a better way of setting a strategy, a better way of following progress and measuring results, figuring out how to drastically accelerate how decisions are made, improving the meeting culture, and improving the things that we talked about, including psychological safety and teamwork. So yeah, it's a very practical management book that people enjoy for it.
Yeah. Well, our listeners will have to check that out. I'm sure it's available in all the electronic
Yeah.
sites out there. So before we end out our conversation, I have another question I want to ask you. What is the one thing you see most commonly in organizations that if they changed it would result in wild success?
Yeah, it's about building the muscle to constantly be on the lookout for what is blocking the organization and then figuring out and running experiments constantly to improve the system. It's really building that muscle. It's a muscle that many organizations don't train. They're just stuck in the old ways, and if it doesn't work, they completely reorganize everything. Instead of that, just experiment, run safe to try experiments, and constantly update your system to be better.
Thanks for sharing that. So if our listeners want to find out more about you and your work, where can they do that?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn, so just type in my name and you'll find me there. And our book is on Amazon, and you can find more about it at unblock.works.
Great. Jurriaan, it's been a fascinating conversation today. I really appreciate you joining me on the Science of Leadership.
Thank you. It was a fun chat. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.